All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So, as we all know, one of the biggest, I want to say the biggest free agency acquisition that the Jets made this offseason was acquiring Carl Lawson, defensive end edge rusher from the Cincinnati Bengals. I've liked Lawson for a long time now, even going back to Auburn. There's a lot of things to like, okay, but I don't know him as well as my guy Ace from New Stripe City. So I wanted to bring him on, ask a couple questions, what he thinks of Carl Lawson. Ace, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, bro. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so really, I mean, you've watched pretty much every single snap of Bengals football for the last, I don't even know how long. How long have you been a fan for the Bengals or a fan of the Bengals for?
Probably over 2 decades now, man. It started, honestly, in the early 2000s, really when we weren't really that good with Gus Frerotte at quarterback, Achilles Smith, so the dark years. But that made me a diehard fan, and I've continued to watch them since.
So when you've watched this Bengals defense in the past couple of seasons, it's definitely been under Zach Taylor. It's been the weak spot of the team just from afar. They have a lot of core pieces like Jesse Bates, and Carl Lawson was one of those guys. What do you take away from Carl Lawson's game? What do you think he was good at?
Carl Lawson was just a freak of nature, man. You're talking about a guy who could really just come off the edge, a tremendous combination of speed and power. And I think that's what you're going to get with Carl Lawson, a guy that's explosive, a guy that can just literally wreck a game. I mean, we saw it against the Steelers on Monday Night Football. I'm pretty sure you saw that game as well. That is the definition of what Carl Lawson can be. He's just a guy that comes in, and it was different for our defense because he's not the traditional defensive end that we usually draft. I'm talking about the Michael Johnsons, the Carlos Dunlaps of the world. They're usually 6'6", 285. He was a guy that kind of came in that linebacker, that rushing linebacker kind of mode, but his strength was just amazing. As soon as this guy showed up to camp with the Bengals, they couldn't block him. Like, no one could literally block this guy in practice. And he's essentially translated that every single season that he was with the Bengals. But I would say last year, you're probably looking at the 5.5 sacks and wondering where that production went to. And it simply was because after they moved away from Carlos Dunlap, it was just him by himself. He was our best pass rusher. And he's a guy that's going to not only need some assistance, but it just helps him thrive because that way he can't be double teamed. And last year, it really was our first year seeing him as a starter. Now, you may hear people create this fake narrative that he isn't good against the run. And that's just simply not true. They never played him against there, and they did last season, and he was able to show that he could play on all three downs. So in terms of a weakness, the only weakness that you're probably going to have about Carl Lawson is his durability, and that goes all the way back to college. But last season, he was able to finish the season, and I think that that's the only issue with him is that maybe he might not be as durable, but when he's in there, he's going to wreck a game, bro. You guys got a great one.
So do you think that's a concern? Because I was going to ask you about the weak spots or, the red flags or the concerns. Do you think that's something or that Jets fans should be worried about? Like, is he going to be durable? Is he going to be, healthy and ready to play every single Sunday? Because we've had some players in the past that are talented, really, really good. They produce when they're out there, but it's just they're barely out there.
Right.
Is there that concern with Lawson?
There's a slight concern on that, and it's really very small. Like, if this were about 2 years ago, I would say yes. But I think with him in terms of his strength and conditioning, and he's put on some more weight, I think that he's more durable now. I think if this were right when he first came into the league, there were some concerns about that. But I think that he's kind of put those away with what he's done to his body. And I mean, you obviously, if you're following him on Instagram or Twitter, he's always working out. And he's just a guy that's going to do what it takes to stay healthy. So I don't think that you guys should worry about it because anytime that he could play, he was going to play. So from my standpoint, I don't think that it's a huge weakness, but the guy has so many strengths. That's the only weakness that I can honestly point out is like he may have some injury concerns, but I don't think that it's going to be, and it hasn't been recently, something that was a big thing. Just literally when we first got him in the first couple of years, it was kind of a thing. In the past 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, he hasn't really struggled in that area.
I mean, yeah. So I mentioned in the first section of the video that I felt like the Bengals' weak spot has been the defense, but they've had like stars in the making. Like Jesse Bates is one of my favorite players. Carl Lawson was one of my favorite players on Cincinnati, even, before he joined the Jets.
Right.
I always felt it was kind of weird, though, because I felt like there was a lot of talent on the Bengals defense, but there just wasn't a lot of depth and the production wasn't there. And you mentioned the 5.5 sacks. And a lot of when Lawson first signed with the Jets, I felt like the national narrative or the narrative by national media was this guy's supposed to be the premier pass rusher. He only had 5.5 sacks, but when you dig deeper, he had 32 quarterback hits. Is the 5.5 sacks a concern? To me, it's not, but I cannot wait to hear your take on this.
No, it's not a concern at all. Like, I can let you know, like, they kind of call me the Adam Schefter of the Bengals because I connect with players and I know people close to what's going on in the locker room. I can absolutely tell you that it was more than just his physical ability. There were certain things that were going on in terms of the coaching staff and things of that nature where they didn't allow Carl Lawson to use certain rush moves and rush the way that he would like. And he just tried to be a good player and listen to the defensive coordinator and the coaches and rush the way that they wanted him to. And so I think it was much to his detriment. And if you look at what happened in that Steelers game, that was a game where he wanted to do a dedication to Kevin Green, one of his guys. And so he completely just unleashed his own repertoire of what he kind of wanted to do. And you saw what happened there. I think it's also a combination of us losing Carlos Dunlap because the way that happened is those guys kind of fed off of each other. And to take a guy like that away from Carl Lawson allowed offenses to strictly focus on Carl Lawson himself. And so the other thing is behind those scenes, there were some people that knew that Carl Lawson could only use certain rush moves. So they would tell opposing tackles, okay, this is what you can expect going into the game. I don't expect that to happen with you guys. So I would say don't read into the 5.5 sacks like it's just that's his ceiling. It really is not. If he's able to do what he was able to do when Marvin Lewis was here and that defense, you're going to see a guy that's going to be able to wreak havoc. I mean, his rookie season, this guy had, if I'm not mistaken, more sacks than Myles Garrett. So that just shows you what and how capable he is. And this was a guy that also finished second to Carlos Dunlap as a rookie in terms of the club record in sacks. So if he is able to be using your defense with Robert Salah, oh, man, have no worries. The pressures, like you pointed out, were major, but he's not a guy that you're going to have to say, oh, he only had 5.5 sacks last year. He's not going to do anything. No, this is a guy that you guys are going to love in New York for sure.
Yeah, and it's awesome that you say that because I feel like, again, the majority of the Jets fans love the signing, but like from the outside, it was people were knocking it. Oh, he was overpaid. Oh, he doesn't have that consistent sack production. But I'm looking at the Jets defensive line, right? Quinnen Williams, former 3rd overall pick. We just brought in Sheldon Rankage from the Saints. I'm looking at, and we do have that hole on the other side of the defensive line. So we're gonna have to figure that out with the other edge spot. But we're looking at Robert Saleh. We're looking at the system, how he can coach up talent on the defensive side of the football. Carl Lawson's still young enough to get better. Do you think, because Lawson's coming off a really good season, do you think Lawson can still continue to take steps in the right direction, or was last season his limit? Do you think he's kind of reached?
Oh, no, like he hasn't even hit his potential yet. Like it's going to be, I think when he gets to you guys, it's going to go to a whole nother limit that Bengals fans were expecting. And this is what I'll say. If there are some Jets fans that are worried, like, why did we get this guy for 5.5 sacks? All you have to do is look on Twitter at what happened with Bengals fans when we lost Carl Lawson. There are still people now saying that Trey Henderson, who we just signed to a huge contract, is no Carl Lawson. So Carl Lawson is going to be a stud, especially under Robert Salah, who's going to utilize him in the right way. We've seen what he did in San Francisco. I can't wait to see Carl Lawson in that system. I don't think that it's far-fetched to say that he may have 10 sacks next season just playing in that system because this is a guy who's going to get after it. He literally just starting last season. So if he comes in as a full-time starter for you guys and you utilize him the way that he should be, the sky's the limit for this guy. Now, I'm not going to say that he's Khalil Mack or anything, but he's like right there in that tier under the elite guys. He's very good if you get him in the right area and he fulfills his full potential, he possibly could be someone similar to a Shaq Barrett, where a few years ago, no one knew who Shaq Barrett was, right? He was putting up mediocre sack numbers, and then he gets to the Tampa Bay and he gets in that scheme and he just blows up. Carl Lawson can be a guy like that.
Right. So 3 years, $45 million. Is that an overpay to you?
Not to me. Not to me, because a lot of Bengals fans would want him for that number right there. And I think that is just an edge rushing market that you have to pay for. It would be different if you were paying him $20 million, but this guy is only, if I'm not mistaken, about 25 years old. He's right in the prime of his career, and the market's always going to reset, right? They just got the new contract money from advertising and the media, so that number's going to go up. We're going to see guys get paid $20 million probably as soon as next season. So $15 million, not too much to pay for Carl Lawson, not that much at all. I think the Bengals. I think I heard something along the lines of, as soon as you guys made him that deal, they tried to up it immediately to get Hendrickson in. So I don't think that it was too much for you guys to pay for that.
Yeah, it was weird because I remember going back to that, section of the legal tampering period. It was kind of Trey Hendrickson, Carl Lawson, Jets, Bengals. Like whoever landed the first one, the other team was going to get the second one, because the Jets were,
Right.
They made their offer to Trey Hendrickson. They wanted him really, really bad. And it was just kind of funny how everything played out. Do you think Hendrickson is an upgrade over Lawson? I think they are two different style of players, but I want to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. They're two different style of players, and it just depends on what you consider an upgrade. If you're talking about physically, talent-wise, in terms of natural ability, I think that it's a downgrade, because Carl Lawson has some crazy athleticism. I mean, just look at the guy. Hendrickson, it just really depends on what the output of this season is. If Henderson is to get 6 sacks, is that an upgrade? Some people might say yes, because it's only a half sack more. It just really depends, just because they're two different players. But I think that they're both upgrades for their respective teams because of what you're going to get from both of them. You're going to get different things, but I think that it's a downgrade for us in some ways, and it's an upgrade in other ways. If Hendrickson is able to get 13 sacks, then yeah, it's an upgrade. But I don't think that he's going to get as many pressures as Lawson would get. So I think for both teams, I think you're definitely getting an upgrade there. I think most people, if you asked Houday Nation, they would say it's a downgrade. So all the people that are in love with sacks, I love sacks, but there are a lot of people that put everything just into sacks. And we signed this guy that had 13 and a half sacks, and there are still Bengals fans right now saying that it's a downgrade from Carl Lawson, who had 5.5, but he also had those monster pressures.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, man. I mean, I liked when the news officially broke that the Jets brought Carl Lawson in, I was ecstatic. And I was kind of shocked just to see everybody's reaction to it, just kind of saying like, he's not elite, he's not a top 5, but I'm like, man, he's 25 years old, he has speed and power, and you mentioned that before. But speaking of the Bengals free agency, man, like this is kind of off topic. I really like what they did. Like Chidobe Awuzie, I think, was an underrated signing. Mike Hilton from Pittsburgh, you're taking him away from a division rival. What do you think of Cincinnati's like overall free agent haul?
So apparently I'm not in the majority of this, but I love it. Like, I love what they went out and did. You talk about them getting all of these young corners and essentially having to pay less for them than they would have a William Jackson III, stealing Mike Hilton away from the division. That's going to help. Adding some depth at corner, which was it was tough for us last season. We went through so many corners. We had guys from the street on their plan, so that was definitely an emphasis that you could tell. And then you talk about bringing in Hendrickson for a team that only had 17 total sacks last year. We had to get someone because Carl Lawson was literally our best edge rusher left, and you guys signed him, so we had to respond. And I'm glad that they responded the way that they did, because if they were to strike out, oh man, there'd be a riot at Paul Brown Stadium. And then you talk about the offensive side on the ball, which was another weakness for us, that offensive line with Riley Reif, them being able to get him on a bargain deal, it seems like, even though he is a 32-year-old right tackle. I can tell you this, Bobby Hart, not a big fan of it. Nobody in Houday Nation was a big fan of him at right tackle. They replaced him with Reif. I love what they've done, especially when you look at the NFL draft and which positions are strong and which positions aren't. Cornerback, edge rusher, and defensive interior tackle, not strong. Offensive side of the ball, the tackle class, the wide receiver class, very strong. So I like what they did going into the draft, because if you're going to just try to get 2 or 3 edge rushers in the draft, not to say that the guys are horrible, but there's no Myles Garrett. There's no Chase Young. There's no guy that you can just throw in there and say, hey, he's going to give me eight sacks this season, legitly. So I love what they did in terms of getting younger. And recovering with the Carl Lawson signing, because another thing is the Bengals have never announced of signing on the first day of free agency. Like that literally, like I can't even remember that happening. So for it to happen right after we lost Lawson was huge. And I just love what they're doing in terms of stacking. And Eli Apple, he's not the greatest player. I know that. But he's our 5th corner. So I'll take him as our 5th corner versus some guy from the CFL or some guy off the street that no one has heard of. So for me, I love what they've actually done in free agency with the depth.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I really, really like what Cincinnati did. But Ace, I appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much.
Oh, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
One last question, real quick, just because it just popped into my mind. Sitting at spot number 5, Penei Sewell or wide receiver? Jamar Chase if he's there, Devontae Smith if he's there, or Sewell? Where do you kind of fall?
It's tough for me right now because I was pro Sewell the whole entire way from day one. They did get Riley Reif. The thing that makes it even harder is they only signed him to a 1-year deal, and we still have Jonah Williams here. So for me, I think I still lean towards Penei just in case. If he's there, you just have to do what you can to protect Joe Burrow. But it's going to be tough. And if I had to say what the Bengals might do, they may take Jamar Chase. I mean, he was Joe Burrow's #1 weapon in college. They're good friends. I'm sure Joe Burrow – I've actually heard from some people Joe Burrow wants him bad. So okay. I think realistically it could be a chance where they take him. But honestly, which I'll ask you later on my show, I kind of wonder what the Jets are going to do, because essentially when we moved all the way down, the first team that we thought about that could potentially take Penei at the time was you guys. And we're like, man, what are they going to do? So I think for now, I'll still say Penei, but there's a great chance that it could be Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if I was running Cincinnati, I think I would go with Sewell just because you need to protect Burrow. And I feel like the wide receiving core is solid with Boyd and these guys. T. Higgins coming on the scene. I see you got the jersey in the back.
Yes, sir.
But you can take Jonah Williams and move him inside. And then now you're upgrading at guard, you're upgrading at left tackle. And now, like you said, Reif can go over to right tackle and make some noise. But thanks so much. I appreciate you hopping on. Ace, New Stripe City's link will be down below in the description box. So go check him out. Go subscribe to him. Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, man.
Oh, appreciate it.
Cool. And as always, go Jets.